Okay, our next report is the fall athletic summary. Gentlemen, if you join us up front. This starts on page 89 in your packet.
Okay.
Go ahead and tell us who you are again, so the people who don't know you.
John Treiber, I am Assistant Principal for Athletics.
I'm Tom Doman, the other Assistant Principal for Athletics.
Okay.
Thanks for having us. You were given a memo from Tom and I, just kind of introducing the forms that follow, and I wanted to make mention of this year. We're kind of tracking, obviously, participation for the board is the biggest goal that we have in athletics and in clubs and activities. And we noted that we have student trainers that do work with our athletes, and they have not been counted in any of the participation rates previously, so we'd like to start adding them because they are giving their services up. You saw one of our student trainers get a big award tonight, and Bill Fry does a great job with the student trainers and getting our athletes ready for competitions, and they put a lot of time in, pretty much close to what an athlete would do. So we're going to start keeping track from here on out, and just to make mention, on your cover sheet, we had 14 student trainers in the fall that participated under Bill and Lou's guidance, and this number is up from 9 last year and 11 in 2013, so we'll start to keep that as well, because that's not an athlete, not an activity, but it is a participation towards what we're trying to accomplish, so they're giving up a lot of time. And then on that cover sheet also, you can see the projections and the actual percentage of athletes that have participated throughout the last 5 years, and then also down at the bottom, the user's fee that is collected and charged for per sport. On the next form, talking about the fall athletics summary, Mr. Welsh read the names of the student athletes professionally, and we are going to talk about the individual sports. Tom's going to talk about the girls' sports, which he's in charge of, and I'll talk about the boys' sports and how they performed in the fall. So I'll let Tom.
Yeah, starting with the girls' sports on the top there. Girls volleyball had a great year. They were the champions of the conference, the MSC Conference champs this year, and progressed into the state tournament and had a great showing. The girls' cross-country team won the regional. So they actually were first place at regional, obviously, and can advance as a team to sectional. And then you did see the two individuals, Haley and Nadia, who were champion and second place in there. So that was, again, a great accomplishment for them. Our girls golf team is increased in numbers this year from 13 last year to 23, so we're excited about the increase in girls, and hopefully as the years go on that will turn into overall competition increases and more participation for them. The girls tennis team was a varsity record of 12-5, and they were in third place. So having to travel over to Oak Brook and play tennis every day, the girls did have a little decrease in the numbers this year as far as who participated, but we did have full level participation. We competed at every level in the conference and outside the conference and some other levels actually. So we still had lots of girls competing. Just with the travel, it probably had a little dent in the overall number of kids who stayed with it. And then girls swimming, again, the record was 6-3 overall, fourth place finish in the sectional. Really changed a lot in the swimming program this year. Under Mike's guidance, he's changed the training, and so hopefully the results in the future will see more competitive swimmers at a higher level. And you saw that Julia Keller had a team record in the 100 backstroke. So those were the girls' sports for the fall.
Also with the girls swimming, Mike is our feeder program coach as well. It was one of the goals that we had, was to connect to the feeders more to the high school, and he's done a great job doing that. Tom was also going over some of the next handout you have in regards to number of athletes that participated in the last 5 years, so I'll do the same thing. So with the boys sports, cross country being the first listed, varsity level, they took second at the regional. We hosted the regional, very successful boys and girls as a host. And we placed 7th at the sectional and just missed a chance to get downstate as a team. We were 4th place in the MSC conference meet. Our JV team, coached by Steve Urich, sitting behind me, was first in the MSC conference. And all due to Coach Urich. You saw Mateo was red. He wasn't here tonight. 40th at the state meet. A very fine runner for us, and we look forward to great things out of Mateo. We had many all academic athletes also in boys cross country. Our football program, the Road Warriors. Let me go back a second to boys cross country just to refer to the next handout as far as the numbers. Very similar, not much of an increase or decrease for boys cross country, so they've kind of held steady there. I know I listened to the academic numbers when we look at teachers' ratio of 1 to 15 in classroom. If you kind of look at some of these things in athletics too, some of our numbers in athletics are very high compared to that 1 to 15. Not sure what our numbers are for athletics, but I'm going to bring up a couple points.
It's a much greater number
Yeah.
for the teachers, like 1 to 25 to 28 to 30. Right?
Yeah, and athletics, it's pretty high too. So in some of these, as I read off, you'll see that it's close to 1 to 40. For the football program, the Road Warriors, we had our first 6 contests on the road. They ended up making the playoffs, and we ended up getting 4 home games. They set a record, tied a record for most wins in a season with 10. They finished in second place in the MSC, and they advanced to the 3rd round of the IHSA playoffs. A great season for Coach Curtin and his teams. And also the lower level sophomore group, good nucleus coming up, was 8-1 overall. They took 2nd in the MSC. And the freshman team, these teams also played a lot of contests on the road and practicing on the road and things like that. So really overall, well done job by all our levels in football. They finished 6-3 overall and 3-1 the MSC. You met Ryan Swift tonight, our quarterback, linebacker. That's a unique combination, all-state athlete and a very fine human being as well, and great student. Our boys golf team, let me go back to football numbers, very similar to last year, 128 or 126, so we're keeping our numbers up, in the age of all the concussions and things like that are being discussed, and we have a concussion protocol that we follow with our trainers. And you would think that football, it's not the only concern, but it's one of the concerns that people look at when they put their sons in football. We've done a great job with our medical team and getting kids involved and keeping them involved in football. So our numbers have held steady there, where others have declined in some areas. Our boys golf program, the varsity finished 7-6 overall, 3rd place at the regional. By finishing 3rd, they advanced to the sectional, and they finished. They were in the top 10 of the sectional tournament, and they were 7th place at the MSC tournament at the end of the season. Our Frosh Soft boys golf team was 6-5 overall, and they finished in 5th place at the MSC tournament. And you heard about our all-conference and all-academic athletes already. The numbers that I was referring to in boys golf, 41 is very large, for one coach. And we have many times where we're practicing at 2 different locations, be it the range and on the putting green and things like that. So we are looking for a boys golf coach. Coach Rocco did resign. So right now it's posted, and we're looking to replace that person. And so we're hoping that those numbers will continue to be as well as they are, but it is a difficult task for one person with 41. We'd like to keep as many boys interested as possible in that program. And then boys soccer had a great season. They were conference champs, undefeated, 10-6-4 overall. The sophomore level, they were 8-6-1 overall, and freshman level, 9-8 overall. One of the best seasons in recent soccer history. They've knocked off last year's state champs, Wheaton Academy, and also had a good run there in the regional. We had a tough loss to Chicago Kelly, but the boys soccer numbers did go down a little bit, and we had over 80 boys try out for soccer, could not keep them all. We had to cut a few due to safety and coaching staff with 3 levels. We'd like to in the future hopefully add another level in soccer. I think we probably have about 90 plus kids, boys that would come out for the team. So that's one that we would look at maybe in the future, to look at a possible add a level and add a coach in that sport. So that's kind of our fall athlete summary. Open up for questions if you have some.
Any questions from the board?
Just the one question on some of your ratios to coach. Are you taking into account volunteers?
Volunteers can't take student athletes to a competition on their own, so a certified coach has to be with them. So if we do have a volunteer, that's a luxury. And we encourage coaches to find volunteers, but not every sport has them. So they can't go practice at a different site. They've got to be with a certified staff member.
But we have volunteers that we approve, right? So for
We have some
training here.
volunteers, yes.
Right, but like, I think what he's saying is you can't have the head coach taking the 12 starters to the golf course and then the volunteer staying back. There has to be another certified coach with them.
Correct.
You could have a volunteer, the football staff could have a volunteer out working with the other certified coaches to help improve
They have to be in the vicinity.
ratios.
Yeah.
How's the new conference working out?
Good. 14 schools, and I think that possibility of expansion maybe in the future, looms for this conference with the variety of private and public schools. So I think that possibly in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll see there have been a couple schools interested in applying, and I think that it'd be well for Riverside Brookfield to find some schools that look more like us as well. So that would be something we'll look for in the future.
There's been continual discussions among the athletic directors about, who's in what conference or what sports and things. There's a lot of dialogue on trying to match up appropriately, especially with football numbers being somewhat different in the state. So that's been changing little by little.
Yeah, so in this conference, next year, you'll see St. Ed's will move up into the football conference that we're in, and ACC will move down. It goes by your record, how you compete against other schools. That way, no one's always getting beat up on, and so we got some parity in the conference.
Tried to make some adjustments, and it wasn't always by the size of the schools. So some schools like IC have lower numbers but higher, competition. So that was it's an ongoing process when it comes to the different sports and what conference each team are in.
So I have a question for you. In the fall, if we do not have the building, our section 3 of our development over across the street, we will not have tennis. We'll have to be doing the same thing again. We will have to be traveling outside
In
and
the spring, yeah.
playing out for the spring. Also for the fall, that happens too, right?
Correct.
What about track-wise? Because one of the things is the long jump and everything, we'll have to move our track events off-site then, right?
Yeah, I've already contacted, Morton is going to host our Bulldog relays. We've already secured that site, just like they did last spring for us. And then I've also contacted Glenbard South to host one of we've got reciprocal agreements, so if they host it next year, then we'll try and get it back the following, like we did in football.
So we won't, so next, in the spring, we won't have any track meets here?
We're hoping to. It depends on if the facility's right.
But if we don't have the facility right, it's gonna be,
It'll be just a practice site, and then we'll be,
and the boys will be playing away.
correct.
Boys and girls, boys tennis,
Boys tennis would be the way.
boys and girls track would be playing.
Boys and girls track, if we can host, if our facility's available, we'll do it. If not, then we'll be on the road at the MSC schools.
Okay.
So,
So one of the questions I had asked last year was to look at this from a athletes and a capacity. So what's the utilization of each of the sports? So for example, last year girls golf was 13. Was that at a 50% capacity, or was that at a 90%? Because now it was at 23. I'd like to look at it that way and to say how many more potential students could have actually participated in fall sports. You guys may come back and go, we were at 100% capacity, and so therefore we couldn't even get you more than 426 or 440 kids to participate anymore. So what I like to have seen by sport is the capacity. Secondly, I'm concerned about the collection rate on our #1 participant sport. If it's 200 and they start in August, it's very likely that's their first sport. you would expect that to be closer on a per-student basis to be $200, not $121. And our low income is somewhere under 20%. So if you do the numbers, we shouldn't be averaging 121 on pay-to-play on football.
Depends on how many low.
I understand that, but then we should see
On
those kind of
average.
numbers. Around 121, that's pretty big.
Our wave students is listed
40.
on the bottom by sport. And then you also have to remember the board, when they implemented the pay to participate, gave parents the option to do the parent payment plan. So we don't require people to pay the 200 if they come in and see a payment plan and are paying $20 a month or 30, whatever they can afford. as
So
long
this
as
isn't the full,
Some of these are still being paid.
Yeah.
Throughout the year.
Someone could only be a football player and pay all throughout the entire school year to pay off their 200. That was what the board put in place.
so then maybe we need to see is collected versus what we expect to collect overall.
If they don't pay though, they're penalized, right? They can't get records, they can't go to prom, they can't.
Correct. There's some.
Yeah. They can't go to prom, that's the biggest thing, we get a lot of money.
Most of our fee money from all of our fees comes in around prom and graduation.
Yes.
When you start withholding tickets and participation in those things. That's when all of a sudden books start popping up, equipment returns start popping up, fees.
Okay,
So is that doable, the capacity side of it?
Yeah, that was one thing that when I first got here, I noticed that, we were talking about participation, engagement, but we are, I would say, just off, top of my head looking at numbers, a lot of the sports obviously are competing at every level, we're not missing any levels, so, we really are pretty close to 100%, which we could obviously put on paper and figure out exactly.
Right, I mean, you could say, well, based on talking with the girls' cross-country coaching staff, we could have probably handled 35. We wound up having 27, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
each
at, to
sport is a
see.
little different.
It also gives us a sense of indication, probably also how the reputation of the coaching staff, right?
Can't, I mean, a lot of times, the kids' passion in the sport is, the
I know it
primary
is, but
concern,
there's also a vibe with the coaching,
Yeah.
certain.
Yeah, that's-
What I would say is, in my conversations with coaches and athletes, and I talked to my own son about it, there's coaches that sometimes you don't necessarily agree with, just like teachers and myself as an athletic director, but you do it for the love of the sport. You're going to have different,
I know.
almost everybody has, almost everybody has an instructional coach nowadays for tennis and golf and soccer, and they all teach, so it may be different opinions, but you do it for the love of the sport. So I think, in reference to your question,
But there's also, you can see trends.
yeah,
You can see trends.
Isn't your other
So-
point, Gary, if one of our goals is to increase
Right.
the activities, how much capacity do we have?
Right,
in
I mean, if
sports?
if everything's up at 100% capacity, we're just beating our heads going, then we need to add, additional sports, or we need to add additional activities to get, if we're shooting to get a very high participation rate of all our students, whether it be athletics or whether it be non-athletics,
So
we're-
we've done this, we've done this report on an annual basis, so last year we reported out at the end of the year what the max capacity
Yeah.
was compared to enrollment and then cost per athlete, so, we could do
Did we
that
have,
again.
did we have the
at
max,
end.
I didn't think we had the max capacity. I don't think we did.
We did, I have it in front of me, so we can
Alright.
update that,
Alright.
at the end of this year for all 3 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you touch on one thing that you brought up is, do you have enough coaches, for instance? So, all of us are familiar with certain sports, kind of how what we did to our children. One of my daughters ran cross-country for 1 year, and some schools have 100 kids on their cross-country team because they have the open, right, and they can run in that. But you can't do it with, maybe you wouldn't be able to do it at our school anyway, but you can't do it with one coach. Other sports like volleyball, what do we have, 3 levels of volleyball? I assume
4 levels.
We try to
4
get to
levels.
where-
What do you carry, 12, 14 kids maybe? If you put 20 kids on a team, they're going to sit there and not play, so they're not going to participate. So in some instances, Gary's point is, okay, if you have 4 levels of girls volleyball, for instance, and you could carry, I'll just pick a number, I don't know, let's say 12 kids, because 6 play at a time, right? So 12 kids, or whatever the number, maybe it's 15, that's 48 students is a reasonable number for girls volleyball, and we had 42. And if it's 15, then you can add 12.
We can figure that, yeah.
And in cross-country, where you had 31 boys and you had 27 girls, there's two issues there. One is, do you have enough coaches for the capacity? And the other is, if you had, could you have 50 kids on the team if you had enough coaches to coach 50 kids? And encourage 50 kids to come out, right?
Yeah, one of the things I brought up was the boys' golf program with 41 boys playing.
That's a
and
lot.
one coach.
Right.
Only 16 play.
Okay.
So that's
So-
over max, that's double max capacity.
Is there only one level on boys golf?
It's 2 levels.
8 and 8.
Oh, 8 and 8, so that's important
Yeah,
to know.
that would
I
be
mean,
max.
if you had
I mean, there is
50 kids on
like
golf,
a
they
diminishing.
just practice all the time, right?
That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah.
Because like in girls golf, we've increased the numbers significantly, which is nice, but then you have a coach whose time is limited,
Sure.
then to maybe less per person, obviously individually, over time, and so you try to struggle with, who do you instruct, giving them all equal time, and then that, there's the balance somewhere, where the good skill level will be continued without the overabundance of having to have too many people to deal with.
So what would happen to the boys' golf team if we decided to make it a cut sport? Would those kids be able to play somewhere else, or is that where we'd have to look to
Well,
increase
I
activities?
think a golfer might be a unique situation where they're probably not going to play football. I'm guessing their body types and things like that. So that type of activity might be just conducive for a golfer. I don't know if they'll. Football's a no-cut sport.
Cross-country.
Cross-country's a no-cut sport. So, it takes some dedication to be a runner. So I'm not necessarily, we don't know if boys golfers would go out for cross-country. That's just something we'd have to find out if we cut. We would recommend any boys or girls we cut to definitely participate in something else, like we do with cuts in basketball and so forth.
Okay.
So,
Anything further from the board?
I have 2 philosophical questions for you, very experienced athletic directors.
Means old.
Number one, in terms of increasing participation, we have some type of PE waiver. What if we expanded that? Do you think that would increase participation in, the varsity and even JV sports?
We have a PV waiver now that allows the kids to waive during their varsity season, correct?
Just
Right.
the season.
Just their season,
Not the semester.
So
not
if
the
you're
semester.
in,
Correct.
if you're in girls swimming, the day after the swim season's over, unlike the marching band, who gets the whole semester off, they have to go take gym, so they have to take a course. They can't leave the schedule open to take a different course. If you were in swimming and what's now girls basketball, I don't know if there are any, but if there were, then they would be able to waive up. But they also have to be on the varsity team too, right?
correct.
So you have to be on the varsity and.
What
during the
expansion
sport.
would you be looking for?
They would be
With the
out,
waiver.
they would be out of PE longer.
Yeah, right.
and-
After their season's over?
More of more of a complete waiver. In other words, we're substituting PE, or instead of taking PE, you're in the sport. In other words, to encourage people to take the sport. I don't know if that would give them an extra academic class necessarily. Would it?
Could?
Yeah.
So it would have to only be on no-cut sports, likelihood,
That'd be crazy.
because the ones who are in the cut sports are likely already playing that sport. So you'd have to go to the no-cut, so you're saying increase the no-cut sport.
Let's not try to figure it out
I'm not
tonight.
saying-
Let's
I'm
let
just-
us think about that and
Next-
see if there's
Just wanted to get the
anything.
opinion.
Next philosophical question.
All right.
Next philosophical question. You alluded this about in the tennis and golf, personal coaches and all that. What do you feel is the relationship of our feeder programs to our, even freshman, sophomore, varsity levels? And I guess my personal concern with this would be that it sort of excludes athletes from participation if you're not specializing in 5th grade. I mean, do you guys have any opinions on that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'll speak of it. As far as specialization, I think it is the wave of what's happening. I don't think a school of this size, should be philosophically in favor of that completely, that they should be sharing athletes and they should be trying to have kids accumulate as much experience in different things as they can. But the reality of the situation is with clubs and parents concerned about the skill development, there is a push towards getting into one activity or one sporting kind of, but I think the philosophy that, and I've always been around, is that, we want them to be exposed to more and hopefully give them opportunities to be in more, but it is more and more difficult because of the outside influences.
Club sports definitely affect our numbers, there's no doubt about it. You're going to find that club volleyball players won't necessarily play girls' basketball anymore, and some of the club sports encourage their kids not to play the high school sport. So that definitely affects us. So we'd be more on the other side. We know that people are going to specialize, and we're hoping that they do it later than sooner, as they come in younger and younger. That kind of gears them towards just playing one sport, and we'd like to see them. If you look at studies now and you listen to a lot of the college coaches, they like to see more of a variety of 2- and 3-sport athlete, because that full year training of one sport doesn't get your body in the shape it should be in. So it has counterproduction in some cases. So
The promises that they make in the clubs and other outside people can be much more direct than we can. We can't promise a kid, if you do this, you're going to get a scholarship. That's, you just have to see that develop. Where clubs, who are a business, tend to have a lot of promises for pay and things, and so, we don't have control over that, but that does influence kids and parents a lot, that there's a promise that if you do this, we're going to get you something, where obviously we're not making statements like that. We're just hoping that they develop and improve year to year, like everything else.
As a parent, I have a volleyball player in club volleyball, and the amount of money you invest, especially at the high school and the varsity level, and the potential for injury, you definitely pulled her from basketball. Can't afford the injuries, because then it takes over the club season. So I think you are seeing a new paradigm for sports. You might want to do an exit survey on each of these sports to find out how many of them do play a club. And even at the sports banquet last year, there were only 3 athletes who were 3-athlete players.
Three-sport.
Yeah,
It's
three-sport
declining
players.
everywhere. Obviously, it's for those reasons.
Okay, we're gonna need to move on, so.
Yeah,
thank-
so just my follow-up, Tim, could you follow up on the 2014 football pay-to-play participation? Because if I added the numbers up, unless you're still collecting from the 2014 year, that's why my concern has been, so.
We thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.